The main promise of Oxla was not to do something completely new and then convincing the market that they need this kind of product. It was rather saying, okay, everybody knows that this kind of product is already needed, but we just have ideas how to deliver this several times cheaper.
I think a lot of now old school businesses that seemed like that they don't have much assets or any physical assets, now it might turn out that they actually might have a lot of valuable resources, meaning data, right?
What we usually compare ourselves to and the type of use cases we talk with are usually what is being covered by the databases that are not real-time, like for example Snowflake, Databricks, not maybe because we like this use case most, but actually that's where the most of the market is.
The Cloud Frontier podcast is brought to you by Simplyblock. In this bi-weekly podcast, we explore cloud infrastructure startups, founder journeys, and discuss cutting-edge cloud technologies. Join us as we uncover the latest innovations shaping the future of cloud computing. Welcome to another yet episode of Cloud Frontier podcast. Today's guest is Adam Szymański from Oxla. Oxla is world's fastest distributed database. That's the tagline of the company. Welcome, Adam. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, nice to meet you.
All right, so I already hinted that Oxla is obviously a super fast database. So tell us a little bit more of how you came up to that idea of building yet another faster Snowflake. How did it come up to you ending up in that type of business?
Yeah, of course. So the reason I started thinking about that was that I've been working in big data area for like almost, I think that more than 10 years now. I was initially working in Google YouTube ads, in Google Shopping Search in Switzerland. After that, I was CTO in several startups, a manager of company focusing on big data and machine learning. And the issue I have seen recurring in all those companies is the cost of data infrastructure. I started digging into that topic, and what I have found out is that there are huge inefficiencies. For example, when I started digging into that problem in like 2016, I was working on Hadoop stack, and the servers at the time could process tens of megabytes per second. But before my journey with data, I was working as a game developer. And I knew that, for example, when you run a game on the laptop, not very expensive one even, it could process about 1 gigabyte of data per second. Mm-hmm. So why this expensive server running a data center with a highly controlled environment could process that 10 times less than a typical laptop? That made me think. I started analyzing open source projects, all source projects on that topic. And I realized that I have idea on how to process the data much faster. It's my experience from the game development industry. So initially Oxla was my hobby project, but there were several points in my career which made me think about this in a more serious manner. Mm-hmm. For example, at some point when I was working on Google Cloud, I'm a huge fan of BigQuery. It's amazing service, and I think the biggest distinguishing feature of GCP compared to other clouds. Yeah. And then at some point, US has enacted so-called Cloud Act, and according to this law, US government can access any server belonging to US company, no matter what's the location of this server. It means that your data might be in data center in Frankfurt, but if the company managing the server for you is from US, then still the data can be accessed by the US government, despite the fact that you are not making any business with any US entity.
Right.
Which was kind of disturbing for me. And I was thinking, okay, there's issue with performance of existing solutions. It's very hard to use big data outside of managed services, mm-hmm. because managing Hadoop cluster at the time was a huge task. Usually, that one team of the data engineers just to manage that, and another team using this cluster. And sometimes it felt like a red team and blue team from cybersecurity, when one team was constantly crashing the stuff and the other one was trying to defend this cluster from the data scientists. Not very comfortable.
Right.
And not, yeah. and not something I enjoy working with. So I was thinking about creating something that is easy to manage, that is much more efficient, and that you can run on premise without depending on any commercial provider.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the journey with Oxla has started. Actual starting point was beginning of pandemic. The thing is that I was working in travel industry at that point. We're about to launch the startup in April 2020. And you can imagine it was not the best
Yeah.
moment, but we couldn't predict that. And that was a huge impulse for me to force me thinking about what next. And I decided, okay, I have this amazing hobby project that looks promising, and I should start looking for financing of that, finding more people working on this project.
So what did you do at that point? So it's quite an interesting story, right? Because you were supposed to do something else, but then pandemic changed your plans. And so did you go first like with an idea of the pitch deck to the investors, or did you like just start coding, in the pandemic, or how was that?
It was my hobby project before, so of course there were some parts of code already there that were basically showing the kind of performance that might be achieved, like running some baselines, estimates on how fast you can run like the typical operations being processed by database, like how fast you can run group by and join all that fluff around, just very basic code,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how does it compare to the same databases. And actually, that was how work on actual databases started. So I had those few snippets of code that were running much faster in databases, and trying to build a database around that
Right.
without compromising the performance. So that's how coding has started, like designing the architecture of a database that wouldn't compromise this very simple code that was very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like basically I was looking for investors. I found I've got several offers. I selected one of them and started building a prototype, started building a team, working on an MVP, the usual path for
Right.
I think every technical project.
You're the solo founder, right? So you don't have a co-founder, or do you?
No, not exactly. So 2 years in project, I got co-founder who
Mm-hmm.
is focused more on the business aspect of Oxla. I am CTO, and there is my co-founder there, Kasper, who is a CEO.
Okay, but you raised, so the first money you raised basically without a co-founder, just with some, as you said, lines of code and the pitch deck. So how did you pull that off? Was it like your background, your sort of track record in the industry? Like how did you manage to do that?
At that point, it was mostly my CV.
Yeah.
Working in Google always helps. And there are even funds solely focusing on Google alums. That's the first thing. Second thing, I already had experience on a managing positions. I was CTO into
Mm-hmm.
startups. And in the past, I had my own company. It was a very small one. I had an indie game dev studio making games on the smartphones when smartphones were a new thing. It
Mm-hmm.
was not successful. In the end, I had to close that. But, still finding a company when I'm 24 years old is something that investors enjoy. So in that, I think that the most important part was my CV.
Right. Yeah, obviously that makes sense. I mean, like with such an impressive profile, it's obviously easier to raise than for someone who's just like doing it first time and just
Yeah,
came out of university, right? So I think a lot of founders like look at those success stories when solo founder or someone raises a large round, and they always like think that they can do it, but it's a process, right? So I think you've already done a lot to be at that point, to be able to raise that kind of with that kind of ease, right?
yeah, because basically you need to build a trust in the investor that you can do the stuff you're promising to do. So I think this also depends on the business type. Uh, what every kind of company is a bit different, but yet the main promise of Oxla was not to do something completely new and then convincing the market that they need this kind of product. It was rather saying, okay, everybody knows that this kind of product is already needed. Like there are already a lot of companies doing exactly that. But
Mm-hmm.
we just have ideas how to deliver this several times cheaper. So that was this part that requires some trust of investors, trusting that okay, this guy that came to us can actually deliver the stuff on which there are engineers from Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and so on working on right now. That he can do this better. Okay, it's hard to believe that. So that requires some work on my part, a lot of meetings, of course. But in the end, I think that without my previous experience, it wouldn't be possible at all because people, in the end, actually, nobody's checking the measurement, nobody's checking the tech. People are
Right.
just checking your previous accomplishments, actually.
Yeah, I fully agree because obviously what we do at Simplyblock it's also relatively deep tech and it's the same thing. Not a single investor, maybe one out of 100 that we've spoken to really looked into the the code or the product because eventually it doesn't matter. At this stage you're investing in a founder, right, and in a team and
Yeah,
in belief that this team can actually do it and take it further. So even if there's like some existing piece of good technology, it doesn't matter because if the founder drops out, it's worthless, right? So I think
yeah,
makes plenty of sense. One question obviously comes to my mind, and I'm sure you've gotten that question a lot of times. So I mean, okay, someone now believes that you are generally a faster Snowflake and more efficient Snowflake, or more efficient distributed analytical database can be built. But now the question would be always obviously, even if you can do it, why Snowflake can't do it, right? Uh, what's your answer to that? Because I'm sure you've heard it many times.
yeah. A lot of times, I don't think there is any single good answer. The main one is that if you have already existing business, it would be very, very hard to build uh, actually competition to your actual product that is being used to pay your money. And if you think about that, you need a lot of skilled people to do that. So that would mean that you get people from your product that is actually earning you all the income and put them aside for next like 2 or maybe 3 years to build something, and then it wouldn't be even actually a complete replacement for what you have already.
All right.
So that would be hard. And what I have found out is that if you work within some existing, let's say, thinking framework, it's very hard to start doing the same stuff but in completely different way. You have already this path of thinking about the project. Actually, at some point, we uh, hire some people with huge experience in databases.
Mm-hmm.
So while they were extremely helpful in things like management of the database system, when they have seen our query engine, they say that okay, it looks like something completely different than we have seen so far in our career. And that's why I also think it's very hard to invent something completely fresh if you're
Mm-hmm.
working in a given area for such a long time.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And what is your main value prop or main promise to the customers at the moment? So as you said, you're not going to build something that's more feature rich than Snowflake, right? So that's very clear. So what is that sort of niche aspect or niche sort of audience that you're going for? Is it just cost? Is it just speed? Is it both? Like what are your early users like really appreciating about your product?
Basically, what we have is higher throughput, which of course might mean speed, might mean cost, depending on your use case. If you want to stay with your budget, then you will be able to achieve more, but you will have better speed. If you want to reduce your budget, then basically put less infrastructure, and you get similar performance in the end, but at a much lower cost. But what is attractive for people is, we start, of course, with the price because that's easy to compare. There are nice numbers, and then we go to less tangible things, like, for example, being more versatile. If you
Right.
work with typical OLAP database like Snowflake, you cannot use this efficiently in serving the traffic because it has pretty long response time. Even for simple queries, it requires at least usually hundreds of milliseconds to return a response. While if you have, for example, interactive dashboard, you want this to very very responsive, and then you need a response time of like tens of milliseconds. And then usually people turn to real-time databases, like for example ClickHouse or Druid maybe. So Oxla can do both, which simplifies a stack a lot because you don't have to maintain several different kinds of databases and then keep the data consistent between them. And also, Oxla is very easy to maintain compared to written databases. Almost all written databases are storing the data on local storage, which means that first of all the cost of storing data is much higher, but also things like scaling the cluster is much harder. So these kind of advantages of Oxla usually are getting important after getting initial interest of the potential customer. But of course, what grabs attention is the cost savings.
Right. And who are the customers, or what are the organizations that are most interested right now in that product? Like what is the profile of those companies?
Now, of course, if the customer has, I don't know, tens of gigabytes of data, that already the infrastructure is not that expensive, so it's not usually interesting for this kind of companies. If the company has a lot of data, but actually the data is a small fraction of the unit cost economy or operational cost, then they're not interested in that. So we have to focus on the businesses for which it is matter of basically having a healthy business.
Right.
In the end, it usually means projects related to IoT and cybersecurity. If you think about 1 gigabyte of data from e-commerce, of course, there are kinds of data that are not very valuable, but let's say that you have 1 gigabyte of transactions happening in e-commerce. Within 1 gigabyte, you have a lot of that, and the value of the data is very high. So the rate of investment you get from this data will be very high. It means that even if a database is not very fast, in the end, it will be working pretty fine from the business perspective. But if you have IoT company, usually a single data point is worth less to nothing.
Right.
Even if there are some gaps, people just fill
Right.
them interpolating the data, right? Yeah. And that means that to get a value from the data, you need a lot of that. And these kind of businesses like IoT, cybersecurity are producing lots of data, but usually they are very limited in what they can do because of the budget constraints. So these kind of customers are most interested in what we are doing right now.
That's very interesting. So basically, some sort of density of data. So the businesses where sort of the density of data is not that high, right? So in other words, they have to collect lots of data, so it has value, right? Yeah, that's very interesting. And so what kind of, do you see any kind of cool use cases already with your customers on how do they use Oxla for their sort of end goals?
Yeah, what I was surprised with in the industry that surprised me is power industry. Actually, companies operating power grids, power plants, and the whole ecosystem around that. I've recently last several months I have learned so much about that topic. I'm just surprised how much data is there.
Right.
For example, there are companies that are observing the past prices of the resources of the energy sources, and then predicting what kind of contracts, so, for example, heat providers you have to make to optimize your energy mix for the future. Because it's the market is highly unpredictable here, it's heavily dependent on the weather. So you have a lot of sensors, lots of market data that you have to combine to produce this kind of predictions. So those are the kinds of businesses that we talked with right now. And to be honest, I was surprised how much data they have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's very challenging to be able to predict the prices of energy, really, right? Because there's so many components that affect that. So I guess they try to really collect all kinds of data they can, right?
Yeah, weather data, market data, power usage data, and all of that is producing a heavily granular data sets that are heavily localized, geographically speaking. And things like amount of sun in given region of given country plays a huge role in this business.
Of course.
Or wind power, and then price of conventional energy sources like oil or gas. To be honest, I was surprised by the complexity of the market.
Right. And do you see also like, do you foresee like Oxla running, let's say in autonomous vehicles, or like some sort of cars, or any kind of vehicles as well at some point?
Actually, we got some discussion with people working with the drones. The thing is that what is becoming more and more popular are swarms of drones.
Mm-hmm.
And that, first of all, drones are producing also, they have lots of sensors, so they are producing a lot of time series data.
Mm-hmm.
If you are working on drones in R&D of drones, then first of all, you need to have some black box solution that allows you collecting the data and then doing analysis post-mortem, what has
Mm-hmm.
happened, what went wrong, what went bad, at which point there were some kind of mistakes. So if you have a single drone, that usually already means pretty significant amount of data. But
Right.
then if you have a whole drone, whole swarm, then first of all you have those time series for lots of drones, and then you have all the communication going between them, and then debugging this complex work, which would be very very hard without a proper database. So first you need a database within the drone to collect that, and then a database outside that
Right.
to dump this and analyze afterwards. Typically, what you can see right now in autonomous vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
what we have seen most of the time when we talk to people having, doing edge computing, whether this is in vehicles or, for example, in edge routers, is using PostgreSQL. It's open source. It's
Yeah.
very well known. Now everybody knows how to use that. But these kind of databases have issues with data compression. With column-based solution, you can store actually even what we have observed, even 12 times more data within the same storage. So that's why we have customers thinking
Right.
about
And
migrating to
do you
Oxla.
know solutions like Timescale or InfluxDB, for example, like the time
Yes,
series?
yes. But timescale is impressive solution, but that is working just on a single node,
Mm-hmm.
which is restrictive. Well, if you have a very large data set, then single computer is not sufficient to process all of your
Right.
data. Influx, it's a bit harder topic. Recently, there was Influx 3.0 released
Mm-hmm.
that was trying to overcome the limitation that previous versions of Linux have, like namely the cardinality of time series, like the number of time series you can store, for example, distributing the computing. So what they have done is they have adapted and glued together projects like Apache Arrow, Parquet, and Data Fusion query engine. But in the end, what they have ended up with is a pretty generic open source database, like
Mm-hmm.
built out of those ready-to-use building blocks. So in the past, they were highly specific on time series use case. Right now, with these generic
Mm-hmm.
building blocks, what they got in the end is a pretty regular database. Also, when it comes to performance statistics.
Understood. I'm asking to trying to also understand your positioning, right? So product market fit obviously is a big topic. So how do you actually indeed see yourself, positioning Oxla in between now, I guess, Snowflakes and Databricks and so on, but also, I guess, somewhat covering the topics as you mentioned of even like more traditional SQL or time series databases, right?
What we usually compare ourselves to, and the type of use cases we talk with are usually what is being covered by the distributed analytical databases that are not real-time, like for example Snowflake, BigQuery, Databricks. Not maybe because we like this use case most, but actually that's where the most of the market is.
Mm-hmm.
If you look on the spending on Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, it's several billions of dollars yearly. So the Snowflake revenue is about 2 billions, Databricks is about 1.7. The estimates of BigQuery revenue are about 2 billions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are many players that has like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue per year, like Vertica, Cloudera, and so on and so on. I can talk about this pretty long.
Right.
But if you look on relational databases, there are very few solutions that you can use. You have a ClickHouse, you have open source Druid, and up to recently you had the Rockset, which got acquired by OpenAI recently. So not that many. And then you have time series databases, which basically is Influx and Timescale. Timescale is not our focus because it's a single node database. So large customers cannot use that even if they want. And there is Influx. I don't believe that Influx has higher revenue than Snowflake, for example.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely not.
So the combined revenue of relational databases and time series databases is maybe 10% of what offline distributed analytical databases are making. So we are, commercial business, so we have to focus on the segment of market that brings money. So that's where we focus most.
So essentially, like the IoT use cases or time series use cases, it's more of a go-to-market strategy for you, while you're actually aiming the bigger pie, right?
Yes, so we can actually address more use cases, I think, with our tech than Snowflake. After we will develop more and more of the features. So our tech is more versatile, as I have mentioned before, but that's where basically our use case is. The place where people would use right now those databases like Snowflake, but the unit cost economy would not work, like IoT, cybersecurity, which right now means that for most of the customers are not replacing their solution with Oxla, more like supplementing in the places they cannot use those solutions right now.
Right. Absolutely makes sense. And shifting gears a little bit, what is the hardest things that you guys are like facing right now?
Since the very beginning, that was an extremely technical endeavor, and the whole focus was on proving that you can actually have a distributed database that is so efficient.
Right.
Then this started working, became reliable, had this performance, and then we had to start selling this. And we had to switch the focus of the organization, in which about 90% of employees were just developers,
right,
to organization that sells. And that's something that is happening for us since the beginning of this year. It's a bumpy road, not easy one, because you have to learn how to approach the customer with your product, what resonates well with your customer. So like initial assumption was that, hey, what we have is so amazing that wherever we should go, people should be just excited about that.
Like every startup, I think, like, we have so many features, we've built this and that, but eventually I think what customers want to know is like, okay, what's in it for me, right? Like what benefits me, and how is that journey for you? Because that's super interesting. I think a lot of people are struggling with that.
Yes, in our case, of course, what we have is have a very wide range of use cases, which is nice because we really can go wherever we want and we find potential customer. But the main issue with a new solution is trust. I remember talking with one very large enterprise and them saying, we've tried once to work with some startup. It was looking interesting. They had a nice product. But before we finish our deal, they were out of the market.
Right.
Because the sales cycle in enterprises, as you know, is very, very long, like 9-12 months is typical what you can see. And they don't want to spend their time on working with someone who would just disappear within the next year or two, right?
Right.
So convincing those large companies that no, it will not happen, that you should actually trust our solution, doesn't have, leaky security, that you'll be not missing the features you actually need. This is kind of issues we have to face, and issue of like perceived transition cost.
Right.
So what we have found out is no matter how easy it is to transition to your solution, what you're fighting with is not actual cost of transitioning, but perceived cost, which is kind of annoying because no matter how much effort put in making this transition easier, still nobody actually knows how long does it take. They have just previous experience with other solutions, and this might be just a bad experience. So then we had to find part of the market that is struggling because of the cost of this infrastructure. So, okay, everybody would like to optimize the costs,
Yeah,
especially the current economy. I think that everybody would prefer, changing the database instead of hiring people.
of course.
Uh, but in the end, the best companies are the ones for which it is a matter of paying or not paying, using a proper infrastructure.
Yeah, it's like it's so funny because like when you hear those those sort of quotes from successful founders saying that we have to build something for people who have actually the problem, right? You have to solve the specific pain point and so on. It sounds so generic, but then once you sort of like actually build stuff and try to sell it, you sort of realize you actually learn the meaning of those words. And I think you're not alone, because we ourselves at Simplyblock, and I'm speaking to a lot of other founders, it's always the same thing, right? Unless you're like this 1% or even like 100% success that just like flies by itself, right? It's really takes to find someone for whom like your product is really like of matter of survival, right? It's like selling basically water on a desert, right? Like you need to find that kind of guy, right, who's on a desert and you have water for him, like that type of thing. I think otherwise it's just very, very hard, as you described.
Yeah, all of a sudden, all those terms like beachhead market kind of starts making sense finally.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
And what is your approach to sales, though? So how do you find those people, that really need Oxla? Like, do you, do sales like email outbound? Do you do LinkedIn outbound? Do you go to conferences altogether? Like, what's your approach?
No, right now we focus on conferences. Of course, we try outbound, but I suppose that it's very hard to find a company for which outbound would work. We got some leads thanks to inbound,
Hmm.
actually, which we're very happy about. But right now it's mostly based on network of founders, network of employees, and network of our new salespeople.
Hmm.
And conferences, like
Yeah.
attending all those events, especially the events focusing on given industry in which we know that we excel,
Hmm.
is helping us. Like for example, when it comes to IoT, this can be events related to, as I have mentioned, power industry to industry 4.0,
Hmm.
or for example, software houses focusing on given markets. They're
Right.
also good partners with this kind of product.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And how do you approach those conferences? Do you typically go there to give a talk, to sponsor it, to just attend? Again, all together,
All of that, whatever
all
is
of that,
possible.
whatever works for a given conference. And
Yeah.
maybe one more question on sales. So so I guess you're not getting a lot of it. So you're getting some inbound. You're not running outbound. So how do your like you but you hire salespeople, right? So how do they work? How do they operate? Like what do they do on day-to-day basis then, if they don't sort of have lots of leads to work with, right?
It's not about not having leads, but rather like right now it's mostly preparing for the conferences, what we
Mm-hmm.
do. So first of all, we have some leads in the pipeline. The companies we talked with, we progress on the sales process. So that's one part of an effort of sales team. Another one is like preparing for the conferences, like finding attendants
Mm-hmm.
that might be a good match for us, setting up a meeting with them, and then during the conference, finding those people and
Yeah.
actually doing the meeting, and then the whole process of making the notes after the
Mm-hmm.
meeting and setting up the calls,
Yeah.
sending on the content related to the case of the customer, this kind of activities, collecting testimonials from existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Pretty lot of work, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, that's obviously always a lot of work. I think that's why sales is so hard, because it's just so many things to like think of and also navigate, right? Because there's so many channels where you can sort of interact with the customer, and you sort of have to take care of all of those, right?
Yeah, I'm sometimes surprised for what works for the people. I remember talking with one founder who said that he just look for the web pages. If you have any kind of product, then you can type in kind of your product, top solutions. I don't
Right.
know,
Yeah.
top databases or top anything. And then you have always a lot of pages that are basically, looks like AI generated basically.
Right.
And that, you have a list with some short description of each of those solutions. And they've just written to uh, all the maintenance of those pages, going from the top one to the bottom, saying that, okay, you're missing our solution.
Right.
What was surprising, none of them wanted money. Almost all of them had added that because it improves their CEO, actually. So that was in their best interest. Actually, the email contained like the description of the solution that you could easily paste in, right?
Right.
To have less work on their side. And then that brought a lot of traffic to the web page.
Right.
And pretty significant amount of sales. So, but when they came up with the idea, they were not thinking it will be working that well. But you decide you have to try a lot of things until you find the stuff that works for you.
Right. Yeah, it's always trying and iterating, right? Because for certain things it's just a different different go to market, and people like approach the product differently, right? Or thinking about buying such product differently. And maybe before we have to like wrap up soon, I'll still have a couple questions. So one thing on my mind is, what would it take for Oxla to like take off completely, right? Like go really big. Like what do you think would have to happen like in the next months or year for it to really go big, right? Is it like scoring like some sort of big enterprise customer, or what would it be?
Yes, I have mentioned the biggest issue we have is trust issue. If company has hundreds of terabytes of data, then you don't want this to have any kind of failure. So yeah, like the very large customer that is being trusted within the industry. That's the one thing. Second thing that we work on is security certificates. It might be pretty obvious, but if you think about this from the customer perspective, then if they have some kind of security breach,
Right.
then there are two kinds of consequences for them. One of them is, of course, PR risk, and no amount of security certificates will help with that. No amount of effort on preparing for that before. If it happens, then your customers will not happy in the end. But the second is a regulatory risk. There are certain policies, laws saying that if you don't make proper, if you don't put proper security measures in place, then you face the consequences of data breach. But if you have those security measurements in place, you will not face any fines.
Right.
And in the end, if you are a large enterprise, you work with lots of personal data, you cannot afford to use a solution that doesn't have those security certification, because then they might just face a really high fines from the government. So that's it's a game changer, I think, when you work with the large enterprises having a security certificates.
Right. So basically building trust and sort of certifying that the trust, right? Or just having that.
It's not about the trust, it's a mitigating just a regulatory risk.
Right.
So it's much simpler thing.
Yeah. And also maybe following up on that question. So how do you see Oxla being consumed by customers? Is it mostly like a SaaS model? Is it hybrid on-prem? Like how do you see?
We see a mix of on-prem and cloud. Like it heavily depends on the user. Some user doesn't want to think about managing their own infrastructure. They just love if someone is doing that for them. They are willing to pay extra for that. On the other hand, there are customers who have a bit bad experience with using managed platforms. For example, recently there was a huge hacker attack on Snowflake. As a consequence, a lot of customers their data got compromised.
Right.
And like this, we've seen some of those people right now thinking about their own infrastructure, despite the additional management costs related to that. Losing some elasticity. Snowflake is amazing. It's a very easy to use solution. You can easily deploy just more infrastructure if you need more computing power. That's great. You cannot do that in your own data center. If you need more servers, then if you need that, you will have to
You
wait
need to
several
order them.
weeks,
Yeah.
and then you will have that. It's not a matter of several clicks. On the other hand, no matter how secure is Snowflake, and I believe that they put a lot of effort on their security, they are very, very attractive target for the hackers.
Yeah, of course, of course.
And any single entity is much less interesting for the hackers than the Snowflake. So in the end, that means that okay, even if their security measures are just worse than the Snowflakes, then they are much less attractive to target. So in the end, that gives some additional layer of security.
Right. But what about customers just self-hosting that, but in the cloud, like on AWS, for example, right? Because that sort of gives you the scalability, but you don't give your data away, right?
Yeah, we observe that it happened because still, if it's working within their infrastructure that is rented from cloud or the proprietary data center, we do not have control over that, which means that compromising our security doesn't compromise their security.
Exactly.
So yeah, we see actually this trend right now. Maybe it's not like most of the companies are doing this because that's not happening. But yet there are certain industries for which this is important. Like energy industry is really conscious about this issue.
Right, because they have so much customer data, right? And if that leaks, that
Actually, not even customer data, but think about that in other terms. It's We talk about sensor data, nothing personal here. Even actually, if you think about that, even if the data got leaked, then most probably the impact wouldn't be that high. But the issue is disrupting those services.
right.
Like nobody would like the power plant going down because of the hacker attack.
Yeah, of course. Right. So it's more of that kind of concern. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. All right, Adam. I mean, we need to wrap up. So I have those two traditional closing questions. One is, what is sort of the most valuable resource or pool of resources that help you to shape your views over that next gen cloud infrastructure, right? It can be books, it can be blogs, podcast suite. Like, how do you sort of feed yourself with new information?
Mostly talking with people.
Right.
No single company has very wide view. Everybody is focusing on the use case and like talking with the customers, hearing how many surprising ideas they have, so many surprising solutions they have is always inspiring for me.
Right.
So that's for me the main source, like other people,
Right.
basically.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And what is the most exciting thing that you see happening out there in cloud infrastructure space or in databases space?
Right now, data sharing. Like 10 years ago, that was unthinkable to have stuff like, for example, what Snowflake has created or Google, having a marketplace for data. Current rise of LLM models, machine learning, is making data something really, really valuable. Several years ago, The Economist has written that the data is new oil. At that time, it sounded exaggerated,
Right.
but right now it's sounding more and more true. And for example, recent acquisition of Tabular by Databricks with the valuation of $2 billion is showing how much the tech for even sharing the data, nothing else, how valuable is that, and that is still surprising me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good one indeed, because I think a lot of now old school businesses that seemed like that they don't have much assets or any physical asset, now it might turn out that they actually might have a lot of valuable resources, meaning data, right?
Yeah, this has changed a lot. In the past, the resource were customers. Like you could sell a Facebook group based on
Right.
number of active users, but right now you don't even have to have users. You might
Right.
just have a data.
Right.
That's surprising.
Right, which you can collect, from wherever, right, these days as well.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's a great conclusion. Thanks, Adam. Is there anything else you'd like to share to the audience? Where to find you, where to find Oxla? Please, it's your time now to share.
Yes, so if you're looking for an efficient database, you are struggling with costs of your data processing infrastructure, then give us a visit on oxla.com, contact us. We'll be glad to help with your problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and obviously we'll put the links in a show notes so everyone can find Oxla easily. Thanks, Adam. Really pleasure speaking to you. Have a great day, and till the next one. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. Cloud Frontier is brought to you by Simplyblock, an intelligent database storage orchestrator. Get more IAPS and lower latency for your databases in the cloud. Visit our website at simplyblock.io for more information.